On this week's show, we look at Suzuki and Fleury after 2 games and discuss the chirp heard around the NHL world. This is Hockey Inside Out. Welcome to the show. My name is Adam Susser. On today's episode, we have Mr. Stu Cowan joining us from the Montreal Gazette, CBC Daybreak's Jessica Resnick, and Chris Knuckles Nyland. Some are already calling it the chirp of the year after Max Domi was caught on camera. Let's call it eloquently thanking Kasperi Kapanen for throwing his stick at Jeff Petrie, which ultimately led to a penalty shot goal. Even more fun than the actual chirp was the look of shame and embarrassment that was plastered all over Kapanen's face after Domi ridiculed him. I enjoyed that more. What did you think of Max Domi's chirp?
I thought it was hilarious. I mean, it's sort of, that's Max Domi. I mean, the kid comes to play every game. He plays with a chip on his shoulder. He doesn't, and the thing with him, he chirps, but he doesn't back down from anybody either. He stands, so it's, I thought it was funny. I mean, it was sort of kudos to the cameraman who caught him. I thought it was pretty funny.
I think that's what the Montreal-Toronto matchup on Saturday night on Hockey Night in Canada is all about, that you want to see players who are passionate, who are 100% committed into this game, and having a little bit of fun with it. And I think that's great that Max Domi showed some showed some personality, was caught on camera, and I enjoyed it.
Yeah, you know, I kind of liked it in the sense that Kapanen already felt like a fool, and he probably felt more like a fool afterwards. But the thing with Domi chirping, there's one thing about him, he can back it up. So I just hate when guys chirp and they can't back it up.
Yeah, I don't think Max will be thrilled that it got caught on camera, because when you interview him and that, he's very careful with his words and he's well-spoken and that. But I mean, that's a part of his game. I mean, I'm sure his teammates were laughing about it. And Keith Kincaid was saying, you know, he sits on the bench. I was asking him after practice the other day. He says, at home, I sit on the forward side of the bench for 2 periods. And it's hilarious to listen to this guy, the stuff he comes out with. But again, I thought it was funny. I thought it was part of the rivalry. But I'm sure Max wasn't thrilled that
people saw that.
And it was so you could read his lips and what he was saying. So
Yeah, he gets caught every so often, eh, Domi?
Well, he has a fuse, right? And when it snaps, he sort of loses it a bit. And in a way, that's a good thing, I think, Knuckles, right?
Yeah, well, he uses it to his advantage. That's the way he plays. He's aggressive by nature on the ice. And obviously, when you play that type of game, you're going to get in situations where you're frustrated and things can come out. That frustration can come out in different ways, whether it's chirping someone or punching someone in the mouth.
As Knuckles said, though, he backs it up. And I'm sure when you have a small guy like that, I mean, he's not the biggest guy. I guess the rest of the team must look up to him even more. When you have a little guy like that, he'll not only chirp, and you watch him behind the play. I mean, he's pretty dirty with his stick, and he gives out twice as bad as he gets.
Not the biggest guy, but he's got a lot of heart. Last Saturday, the Canadiens came back from a 4-1 deficit in the third period to beat the Maple Leafs 6-5 in a shootout win. Watching that game, what were some of your takeaways from this Canadiens team?
Go ahead.
I think it's their ability to not just give up. That I think in the past we've seen a Canadiens team get behind by a few goals and they've packed it up and said, you know, this game is already over, let's focus on the next one. Whereas now they're saying, you know what, we still have time to play. There's still ways to get back into this game and possibly get the win. And it's great, I think, having a game like that early on in the season, because if they get to a similar situation further down the road, they can say, remember what we did in Toronto, how we were able to come back and get the win, and it'll only help them in the long run and help their confidence and come together as a team.
Yeah, this team, last year they showed this a few times. They had the ability to come back. They had the ability to score goals 5-on-5, which is really key. And, you know, they seemed a little flat at times in the game. And then, honestly, the play by Jonathan Drouin to get that second goal kind of sparked the team. And, you know, they come all the way back. So it was just awesome to see. And it's something you can draw on as the season goes on. You don't want to be in that situation a whole lot, though.
No, I mean, they came back from 2-0 down in Carolina also, but when I was watching it, I wasn't surprised, because last year, this team, one thing about them, they never gave up. They never, ever, ever gave up, and that's carried over to this season. I wrote a column this week, Marc Bergevin 2 years ago after that dismal season said basically attitude was the biggest problem with the team. And at the time, some of us sort of mocked him a bit, like, you know, really, is attitude that big?
Some of us? Who could that have been?
But the attitude change in that room has been incredible. I mean, this is a team, you know, it's interesting, Philip Deneau was saying there's no more cliques in the room. which is sort of interesting. And he says everybody's buying in. And the Shea Weber becoming captain is a huge thing also. I think just the way he's taken over the room, he owns the room now. I think maybe before Max Pacioretty wasn't, I don't think, the greatest leader. I think he let things bother him, and I think that maybe carried over in the room. Whereas with Shea Weber, he owns the room, he runs the room. We're talking about Max Domi, the video clip of him on the bench. There was also one of Weber on the bench talking with Cale Fleury after he made a mistake in the first period, and almost like a father to his son, explaining to him very calmly what he did wrong. So the whole attitude, I mean, in hindsight, I've said this before, I think when they acquired Weber, they should have just made him captain right away and taken the C off Max, and I'm not ripping Max Pacioretty. I just think Max Pacioretty is a goal scorer. He's not necessarily a born leader.
Yeah, it wasn't good for him to be captain from the sense that when you're not scoring goals, goal scorers are temperamental and you're not in a good mood. But, you know, you go back, when you talk about attitude, you go back to when Subban was traded. There was a split in the room. There was a group that liked Pacioretty and a group that was with Subban. It was split. And that trade was the beginning of changing the character in the room. And Bergevin has talked about that, and he certainly did. And listen, it's not all about character winning hockey games, but you need that. You need a good room. I know a lot of people tend to say, well, it's not such a big deal, you know, oh, the room this, the room that. But it is important. You need the talent, too. There's no question about it. But the character of guys goes a long way.
Well, these guys, you know, they play hockey 2 or 3 games a week for an hour each game, but they're together all the time. They're together in the plane. They're together in the room. They're together every hotel. So there's a character thing is a big thing. And I remember Pacioretty a couple of seasons ago when he was struggling early in the year, and he said, it's hard to be a leader when you're the worst player on the ice. And I remember thinking at the time, that's when you really have to be a leader.
Yeah.
Like, it's when you're not playing well, that's when your leadership skills need to come up. So the attitude has changed, and we're seeing it, and this is why this team just, they never give up. So if they're, you know, 2 years ago, if they were down 4-1 in the third period, change the channel. I mean, they're not coming back now. No.
Well, that's what I would love to know, how many people turned off the game Saturday and then were kicking themselves that they missed it.
Fewer than would have turned it off 2 years ago.
And they did it so many times last season, I almost expect that if they can't come back, they're going to put up a real big fight.
Well, even the last game of the year last year was a meaningless game against Toronto.
Yeah.
Look at the effort they put out.
It's great. Small sample size, but 2 games into the season. What are your first impressions of Ben Chiarot on defense?
He's a big boy. he's a big, when you see him in the room, Shea Weber's big. Chiarot looks bigger. He's more muscular, he's more built, he's a big boy. The first game in Carolina was such a fast pace, he seemed to be having a little bit of trouble keeping up, but I don't think he was alone. I think a lot of players were surprised how fast that was. And that's going to be the question for him, right? I mean, the Canadiens play a fast-paced game. He's not the quickest guy, but physically in front of the net, between him and Weber, standing in front of Carey Price is not going to be a fun thing to do. And Chiarot already showed that he's willing to drop the gloves if needed. He showed that in the preseason when somebody runs over Carey Price. And I think that means a lot to Carey Price, because in previous seasons he's been a target on his back.
Yeah, well, I think so far so good for him. Small sample size, as he said. I had a chance to speak with him this week, and what I really liked about him was that, you know, he's from Hamilton, Ontario. He's been playing with the Winnipeg Jets. Playing in Canada is something that's been important to him, and getting the opportunity to have the first, you know, Habs-Leafs matchup there. He said that's always been a dream of his, the hockey night in Canada as a little kid, and those are moments that you really get to cherish being part of an Original Six franchise, which you don't necessarily hear all that often, that players want to come to Canada and play in Canada with the weather here and also the type of media that's around. But I think that's good that he wants to be here. He's been enjoying his moments here in Montreal so far, and we'll have to see how he continues to progress with the team.
Yeah, it's 2 games. Listen, he's a physical player. You look at him replacing Ben. Is it an upgrade? We thought it was before he came here. In the first 2 games, again, it's hard to tell after 2 games, but he surely is a physical player. I think he's going to have to work at moving the puck quicker. I think this team is a lot faster than the one he played on before. I mean, Winnipeg has a fast team, but with these smaller, quicker guys, you're going to have to move the puck quicker. He got in trouble a few times early, but I think that was the whole team at times got hemmed in their own end in both games, and they had trouble getting out. But I think here for a while, he'll start to improve. You know, you got to give it 10, 15 games and see really where he stands after that.
And he's playing with Jeff Petrie, which helps. To me, no knock on Shea Weber, but Jeff Petrie's the best defenseman on this team right now, I think. He's playing more minutes than Weber right now also. And Petrie, I think last year when Weber was out for the first 24 games, Petrie really raised his level of play, and it's showing again this season. So now Claude Julien has got two defensemen he can play 25, 26 minutes a game. One of them is on the ice almost all the time during the game. So I think that's really going to help Shiro also playing with Jeff Petrie.
Rookies Cale Fleury and Nick Suzuki both struggled against the Leafs. Learning curve, or are you concerned?
I'm not concerned. Again, it's 2 games. They're 2 young guys. Both games, actually, they had their moments, you know, and they're going to have their moments all season. I like the fact that the coaches kind of stay with the lines now and is going to keep the lines the way they were, the way they started the season. But Fleury, obviously, a kid who's not going to sit back. He's going to take chances. He's going to take risks. That's how he made this team. He's got to pick his spots a little better. And quite honestly, the nerves are Toronto, Montreal, Saturday night, hockey night in Canada, all that. It's a lot for a young kid. It's a lot for anybody when you get out there. There's a lot of pressure on to perform. And, you know, I think both of these kids, Suzuki too, it's going to take them some time. I think as a fan base, the media, everybody has to be patient with them. They certainly have the tools. And, you know, we're going to see how they develop. But, you know, it's 2 games. It's way too early to really even be talking about the way guys are playing.
I agree that patience has to be key. If you're going to decide that you're going to let these young players have this opportunity, you have to allow them to go out there, make those mistakes, but let them come back and learn from it rather than punish them right away. And I think that perhaps was an issue with the Canadiens in the past, that young players would go out there and they were constantly afraid because they knew if they made a mistake that they would be on the bench or up in the press box for the next game. But this is what it is about becoming an NHL player at a young age. You're going to go out there, you're going to make mistakes, and that's just going to be what you're going to have to deal with.
I can't overemphasize how important Luke Richardson is to the Canadiens. All the defensemen talk about him, how calm he is behind the bench, how he talks to guys, how he deals with them. Cale Fleury made that mistake in the first period in Toronto, came back to the bench, he was right back out the next shift. I'm sure that Luke Richardson just said, don't worry about it, kid, you're back out there next. And to think, you know, Jeff Petrie was telling me last year that he's never heard Luke Richardson yell on the bench. He's just calm, and it's all positive reinforcement. And then the next day at practice or whatever, he'll show them on film what he did wrong. And I think that goes a long way, and I think that's really good for a kid like Cale Fleury because every defenseman in the NHL makes mistakes. And here's a kid, and as Knuckles said, that Hockey Night in Canada spotlight, I don't think you can underestimate how big that is. In Toronto, Saturday night, all your friends, everybody, all your coaches, everybody who's ever watched you play hockey since you were 5 years old, they're all watching. I think that weighed on him a bit. Plus, the speed of the game was so quick. Here's a kid who's been used to playing AHL. It was so fast. But I thought he handled himself well. He bounced back from that mistake, and he's good. He's going to be a good defenseman.
Thing with Richardson, though, honestly, players know when they make a mistake. They know what they did, and as far as him as a coach, not coming, jumping on the guy right away, telling him, you know, and then putting him back out there, that just gives the kid confidence instead of sitting there thinking about it. Oh, I made a mistake, I messed up, I cost the team, and you sit there, and then next time you go out, you're nervous to do anything.
Yeah.
So that's awesome the way he is with those young guys, all of them, and then being able to show him the next day on tape instead of right there trying to correct it, be in his ear. You got to focus on the game. And yeah, you have to be able to take some positive criticism. All players do, but geez, to have a guy like that back there, calm and cool like he is valuable for the Habs.
I think under Michel Terrier and J.J. Daigneault, the kid would have sat on the bench the rest of the first period. And then you're playing, and that's been a problem with the Canadiens for years. Their young players play scared, and you're gonna.
Well, Jared Tenorti always said that.
If you're playing, I remember it was Greg Patterin saying he said he felt like the coach was standing right over his shoulder every time he was on the ice, just waiting to see if he made a mistake. And you can't play that way. You got to let guys everybody in the NHL is going to make mistakes. The best players make mistakes. Shea Weber makes mistakes. They all make mistakes. But as I said, I can't overemphasize how important Luke Richardson is to the improvement with the Canadiens over the last couple of seasons.
1 week, 2 games in. What has been your biggest surprise with the Canadiens so far, if any?
Jonathan Drouin, I guess. Yeah. I mean, he had a terrible training camp, and after one of the last practices, I asked him, "How do you think your training camp's going?" And he went, "Great." And I was like, really? Like, I asked Nick Suzuki how his training camp's going. He said, I need to work on this, I need to work on that. It hasn't been well. But Jonathan Drouin's come out flying the first 2 games, and he's showing the effort that wasn't there previously. And in his defense, the preseason for veterans is just don't get hurt type of thing, right? But he has really impressed me with his effort level, and now we'll see if he can keep it up.
Yeah.
For me, I would have to agree with you with Jonathan Drouin, but it's also too short of a time right now to really be surprised or necessarily impressed because, 10 games in, then you get a little better idea, 20 games in, that kind of way. So I'm going to wait and save it for a show later on.
Okay.
I guess the biggest surprise for me is the too many men in the ice penalties. Two of them. But again,
and they should have had another one. There was one they got away with.
I have to agree, Drouin, but it's 2 games, and you know what? I think everybody is looking from him is more consistency.
Yeah.
Night in, night out, come to work, don't float around, don't give up. Bust your hump. Like on that Kotkaniemi goal in Carolina, he made that whole play by getting to a loose puck. Mm-hmm. Instead of turning or just taking his time getting there, he went to the puck. He beat the forward to the puck, and that's how you make plays. Sometimes there's nothing there. If you're not coming up on a 3-on-2 or a 2-on-1, there's other parts of the game you have to excel at, and that was one of them there that is not really something we're used to seeing from him.
Yeah.
And it was nice to see him do something like that and obviously have 2 good games at the start of the season.
And that goal is something as the season goes on, if he's struggling, the coaches can show him that video. Because also he started that play, he carried the puck from behind his own net all the way into the Carolina zone. Then he won a battle for a puck, then he set it up. I think one of the keys of Jonathan Drouin is he can't sulk if he gets bumped around lines. I think last year he sulked after he got taken off the line with Max Domi. And you look at a guy like Brendan Gallagher, whatever line Brendan Gallagher plays on, he makes that line better. It doesn't matter, first line, fourth line, wherever you put him. Jonathan Drouin is more talented than Brendan Gallagher. He should be able to make the players he's playing with better. I think he needs to realize that as opposed to sulking and saying, I'm on the 3rd line now. Go on that 3rd line, make that 3rd line better. Then you'll get moved up. And Claude Julien did that. He moved him up to take Suzuki's spot in one of the games. So Jonathan Drouin, they need more out of him this year, and I think he knows that, and hopefully for him, he can do it.
He surprised me by just being consistent for 2 games at the beginning of the season. If he can do that and keep that up throughout the season, or at least a good portion of the season, he should be the best player on the Canadiens team, and that would make a huge difference on the team. Well, that is all the time that we have for this show. What are your first impressions of the Canadiens 2 games into the season, and what are some other infamous chirps that you remember being overheard in the NHL? I want memes, I want quotes, I want videos. Post them in the comments section below. I'm Adam Susser, and we'll see you back here next Thursday.